This is Tom Duty, middle-aged American living in New Jersey near the Lincoln Tunnel. If you were to visit my website, you would type Howdy Doody into Google. You'll find the correct spelling of the famous puppet. You then combine Tom Duty in a Google search for my site. I'll be reading from a Rolling Stone magazine, El Chapo, Joaquín Guzman, interview by Sean Penn in the jungles of Mexico while Chapo Guzman was a fugitive. Reader's note, this is very long. I might need to take a break. Listeners, if you audio goes silent, you'll see a default Google image on the screen. This scene here is Port Imperial Ferry, Weehawken, New Jersey, near the Lincoln Tunnel. You see the default Google on the screen. The audio goes silent. However, the minutes and seconds keep ticking. You can fast forward, and I should resume. This is an alternative to breaking it and doing a second video. More to come. This is my first attempt at the break. Again, starting from Rolling Stone magazine very soon. El Chapo speaks. A secret visit with the world's most wanted man by Sean Penn, January 9th, 2016. Joaquín Archivaldo Guzman Loera, El Chapo. In a video interview he sent from an undisclosed location, disclosure, some names have been changed, locations not named, and an understanding was brokered with the subject that this piece would be submitted for the subject's approval before publication. Subject did not ask for any changes. The laws of conscience which we pretend to derive from nature proceed from custom. Montaigne. September 28th, 2015. My head is swimming. Labeling track phones, burners, one pair, contact, one per day. Destroy, burn, buy, balance, levels of encryption. Mirroring through Blackphones, anonymous email addresses, unsent messages, accessed in draft form. It's a clandestine horror show for the simplest, most technically illiterate man left standing. At 55 years old, I've never learned to use a laptop. Do they still make laptops? No fucking idea. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Another gorgeous fall day in New York City. The streets are abuzz with the lights and sirens of diplomatic movement, heads of state, UN officials, Secret Service details, NYPD. It's a week of the UN General Assembly. Pope Francis blazed a trail and left town 2 days before. I'm sitting in my room, the Regis Hotel, with my colleague and brother in arms, Espinoza. Sidebar. El Chapo. Watch 2 minutes of El Chapo's exclusive interview. Espinoza. And I have traveled many roads together, but none as unpredictable as the one we are now approaching. Espinoza is the owl who flies among falcons. Whether he's standing in the midst of a slum, a jungle, or a battlefield, his idiosyncratic elegance, mischievous smile, and self-effacing charm have a way of diffusing threat. His bald head demands your attention to his twinkling eyes. He's a man, fascinated and engaged. We whispered to each other in code. Finally, a respite from the cyber technology, then sizzling in my brain and soul. We sit within quietude of fortified walls that are old New York hotel construction, when walls were walls and telephones were unusable without a PhD, were usable without a PhD. We quietly make our plans, sensitive to the paradox that also in our hotel room, Presidente Enrique's Peña Nieto of Mexico, Espinoza and I leave the room to get outside the hotel, breathe in the fall air, and walk just 5 blocks to a Japanese restaurant where we'll meet up with our colleague, El Alto Garcia. As we exit onto 55th Street, the sidewalk is lined with armored SUVs that will transport the President of Mexico to the General Assembly. Paradoxical indeed, as one among his detailed asks, I will take a selfie with him, flash frame myself and a 6-foot earpiece Mexican security operator. Flash frame. Why is this a paradox? It's a paradox because today's Mexico has in effect 2 presidents. And among those 2 presidents, it is not Peña Nieto, who Espinoza and I are planning to see, and we'd spoken in a whispered code upstairs. It is not he who necessitated weeks of clandestine planning. Instead, it's a man of about my age, though absent any human calculus that may provide us a sense of anchored commonality. At 4 years old, in '64, I was digging for imaginary treasures. Unneeded in my parents' middle-class American backyard, while he was hand-drawn fantasy pesos. If real, might be the only path for him and his family to dream beyond peasant farming. And while I was surfing the waves of Malibu at age 9, he was already working in the marijuana poppy fields of a remote mountain Sinaloa, Mexico. Today, he runs the biggest international drug cartel in the world has ever known, exceeding even that of Pablo Escobar. He shops and ships, by some estimates, more than half of all the cocaine, heroin, methamphetamines, marijuana that come into the United States. They call him Chapo, El Chapo, or Shorty, Joaquín, Archivaldo, Guzman, Loera. The same El Chapo Guzman who only 2 months earlier had humiliated the Peña Nieto government and stunned the world with his extraordinary escape from Altiplano maximum security prison through an impeccably engineered mile-long tunnel. Watch 2 minutes of El Chapo's exclusive first ever interview below. This would be the second prison escape of the world's most famous, notorious drug lord. The first being 13 years earlier from Puente Grande prison, where he was smuggled out under the sheets of a laundry cart. Since he joined the drug trade as a teenager, Chapo swiftly rose through the ranks, builded by an almost mythic reputation. First as a cold pragmatist, known to deliver a single shot to the head for any mistakes made in the shipment, and later he began to establish the Sinaloa cartel as a Robin Hood-like figure who provided much-needed services in the Sinaloa mountains, funding everything from food and roads to medical relief. By the time of his second escape from the federal prison, he had become a figure enchanted in Mexico's folklore. In 1989, El Chapo dug the first subterranean passage beneath the border from Tijuana to San Diego. And pioneered the use of tunnels to transport his products and to evade capture. I will discover that his already accomplished engineers had been flown to Germany last year for 3 months of exclusive additional training necessary to deal with the low-lying water table beneath the prison. A tunnel equipped with a pipe track guided motorcycle with a minimally oxygenized space, allowing El Chapo to drop through a hole in his cell's shower floor into the saddle and ride to freedom. It was this president of Mexico who agreed to see us. I take no pride in keeping secrets. That may be perceived as protecting criminals, nor do I have any gloating ignorance at posing for selfies with unknown security men. But I'm in my rhythm. Everything I say to everyone must be true as it compartmentalized. The truth that El Chapo had extended to us, the trust that El Chapo had extended us was not to be fucked with. This will be the first interview El Chapo had ever granted outside in an interrogation room, leaving me no precedence by which to measure the hazards. I'd seen plenty of video and graphic photography of those beheaded, exploded, dismembered, or bullet-riddled innocents, activists, courageous journalists, and cartel enemies alike. I was highly aware of committed DEA and other law enforcement officers and soldiers, both Mexican and American, who had lost their lives executing the policies of war on drugs. The families disseminated, the institutions corrupted. I took some comfort in a unique aspect of El Chapo's reputation. Among the heads of drug cartels in Mexico, that, unlike many of his counterparts who engaged in gratuitous kidnapping and murder, El Chapo is a businessman first and only resorts to violence when it's deemed advantageous to himself or his business interests. It was on the strength of Sinaloa's cartel, seemingly more calculated strategies, La Cartel, whose famous face is El Chapo, but also includes the co-leadership of Ismael, El Mayo, Zambada, that Sinaloa had become dominant among Mexicans' criminal syndicates, extending far beyond the rural northwest state, with significant inroads to all principal border areas between the United States and Mexico. Juarez, Mexico, Tijuana, and reaching as far as Los Cabos. Sidebar, El Chapo, the timeline of El Chapo. close calls, and narrow escapes. As an American citizen, I'm drawn to explore what may be inconsistent with the portrayals of our government and media brand upon their declared enemies. Not since Osama bin Laden has the pursuit of a fugitive so occupied the public imagination. But unlike bin Laden, who had posed the lucrative premise that a country's entire population is defined by and therefore complicit its leadership policies with the world's most wanted drug lord, we are, the American public, not indeed complicit in what we demonize. We are the consumers, and as such, we are complicit in every murder and in every corruption of an institution's ability to protect the quality of life for citizens of Mexico and the United States. That comes as a result of our insatiable appetite for illicit narcotics. As much as anything, it's a question of relative morality. What of the tens of thousands of sick and suffering, chemically addicted Americans barbarically imprisoned for the crime of their illness, locked down in facilities where unspeakable acts of dehumanizing and violence are inescapable? And murder a looming threat, as we, that is what's systematic in our culture, and out of our direct hands and willing shares, no moral equivalency to those abominations that may rival narco assassinations in Juarez, or is it that distinctive for passive self-righteous? Testing. There is little dispute that the war on drugs has failed. As many as 27,000 drug-related homicides in Mexico along a single year, an opiate addiction on the rise in the U.S., working in the emergency and developmental field in Haiti, I have countless times been proposed theoretical solutions to that country's ailments by bureaucratic agencies unfamiliar with the culture and incongruencies on the ground. Perhaps in the tunnel vision for our puritanical and prosecutorial culture that has designed the war on drugs, we have similarly lost sight of practice and given over souls of theory. At an American taxpayer cost of $25 billion a year, this war policies have significantly served to kill our children, drain our economies, overwhelm our cops and courts, pick our pockets, crowd our prisons, and punch the clock. Another day fighting is lost, and lost with it any possibility vision of reform or recognition of the proven benefits in so many of other countries achieved through the regulated legalization of recreational drugs. Now on 50th Street, Espinoza and I enter the Japanese restaurant El Alto sits alone in a quiet corner beneath a slow-turning ceiling fan that circulates the scent of raw fish. He's a big man, quiet and graceful, rarely speaking above a whisper. He's been helpful to me in many previous excursions. He's worldly, well-connected, and like Espinoza, speaking in Spanish, films him on our plane. Fills him in on our plane, our plans and itinerary. El Alto listens intently, squeezing edamame beans one at a time between his teeth. We consider this meeting our point of no return. We were either all in or we would abandon the journey. We would weigh the risks, but I felt confident and said so. I'd offered myself 2 experiences beyond my control in numerous countries of war: terror, corruption, and disaster. Places where what can go wrong will go wrong, had gone wrong, and yet in the end had delivered me in one piece with a deepening situational awareness. Though not perfect science of available cautions within the design in chaos. It was agreed that I would go to LA the next day in coordination with our principal point of contact, El Chapo. We ordered sake and indulged the kind of operating room humor that might displace our imperfectly scientific concerns. Outside the restaurant windows, a chanting march of Mexican American flowed by in protest against the Peña Nieto government's asserted violence of human rights, having allowed their country of origin to fall prey to a narco regime. Cate del Castillo. Cate del Castillo, one of the most famous actors in Mexico, brokered the meeting. Kate del Castillo. I saw her picture. She's a woman. As I read it, I thought it was a man. Kate del Castillo, one of the most famous actresses, no, it is a male, actors in Mexico, brokered the meeting. Uriel Santana, in January 2012, the Mexican film and television star Kate del Castillo, who famously played drug lords. In Mexico, popular soap opera La Reina del Sur used Twitter to express her mistrust of Mexican government. She stated, readers, forgive the reader note. I'm not going to track it back. I think Rolling Stone has mixed up the pronouns. This is a woman. She, as I thought, but I swear it says, I'm not going to swear. I think it says he. This is a female, Castillo, Kate de Castillo. She stated that in a question of trust between governments and cartels, hers would go to El Chapo. And in that tweet, she expressed a dream perhaps an encouragement to El Chapo himself. Chapo, wouldn't it be cool that you started trafficking with love, with cures for disease, with food for the homeless, children, with alcohol for the retirement homes that don't let the elderly spend the rest of their days doing whatever the fuck they want. Imagine trafficking with corrupt politicians instead of women and children who end up as slaves. Why don't you burn all those whorehouses where women are worthless than a pack of cigarettes without offer? There's no demand. Come on, Don. You would be a hero of heroes. Let's traffic with love. You know how to. Life is a business, and the only thing that changes is the merchandise. Don't you agree? While she was ostracized by many, Kate's sentiment is widely shared in Mexico. It can be heard in a narco corrido, ballads so popular throughout the country, but her views, unlike those folkloric lionizations, are rather a continuity of her history of brave expression and optimistic dreams for her homeland. She had been outspoken on politics, sex, and religion, and is among the courageous, independent spirits that democracies are built to protect and cannot exist without. Her courage is further demonstrated in her willingness to be named in this article. There are both brutal and corrupt forces within Mexico government who oppose her, and indeed, according to Kate, high-ranking officials have responded to her public statement with private intimidations, and hence a responsibility of the greater public to shepherd those who make their voices heard. It perhaps should have come as no surprise that the homegrown icon of entertainment would catch the industry interest of singular fan and fugitive from Sinaloa. After reading Kate's statement on Twitter, a lawyer representing El Chapo, Guzman, contacted Kate. He said El Señor wanted to send her flowers in gratitude. She nervously offered her address, but with the gypsy movements of an actress, the flowers did not find her. Two years later, February 2014, a detachment of Mexican Marines captured El Chapo in a Mazatlan hotel following a 13-year manhunt. The images of that arrest were flashed across the country's television while he was incarcerated at Altiplano prison. El Chapo's attorneys were flooded with overtures from Hollywood studios. With his dramatic capture and perhaps the illusion of safe dealings, now that El Chapo was locked up, The gringos were scrambling to tell his story. The seeds were planted, and El Chapo, awakened to his prospect, made plans of his own. He was interested in seeing the story of his life told on film, but would never entrust its telling only to Kate. The same lawyer again tracked her down, this time through the Mexican equivalent of Screen Actors Guild, and the imprisoned drug lord and the actress began to correspond in handwritten letters and BBM messages. It was at a social event in Los Angeles when Kate met Espinoza. She learned he was well connected to financial sources, including those that funded film projects, and she proposed partnerships to make a film about El Chapo. This was when Espinoza included our mutual colleague and friend El Alto. I learned for their intention to make the film, but I did not know Kate to have any involvement with the project. I did not know Kate or have any involvement with the project. The three of them met with El Chapo's lawyer to explore their approach, but it was ultimately determined that direct access to El Chapo would still be too restricted for their authorized pursuit to rise above competitive Chapo projects that Hollywood would pursue with or without his participation. Then came July 2015, El Chapo's prison break. The world, and particularly Mexico and the United States, was up in arms. How could this happen? The DEA and the Justice Department were furious. The fact that Mexican Interior Security, Miguel Angel Osorio Chong, had refused El Chapo's extradition to the United States, then allowed his escape, positioned Chong and Peña Nieto administrative as global pariahs. I followed the news of El Chapo's escape and reached out to Espinoza. We met in the courtyard of a boutique hotel in Paris in late August. He told me about Kate and that she had been intermittently received contact from Chapo even after the escape. It was then that I proposed the idea of a magazine story. Espinoza, smile of mischief, arose, indicating he would arrange for me to meet Kate back in Los Angeles. At a Santa Monica restaurant, I made my case, and Kate agreed to make the bridge, sending our names for vetting across the border. When word came back, a week or so later, that Chapo had indeed agreed to meet with us, I was called Juan Ringer at Rolling Stones. Myself, Espinoza, and El Alto was given the assignment, and with a letter from Juan officiating it, we would join Kate, who was our ticket to El Chapo's trust, then put ourselves in the hands representatives of the Sinaloa cartel to coordinate our journey. It had been a month in planning by the time Espinoza and I were breathing the New York air in late September and the day on 55th Street. See footage of El Chapo's July prison escape below. 4 days later, on October 2nd, El Chapo, El Alto, Espinoza, Kate, and I board a self-financed charter from a Los Angeles airport to a city in mid-Mexico. Upon landing, the hotel driver takes us by minivan to the hotel we had been instructed to book, suspicious of every living or inanimate thing. Suspicious of every living or inanimate thing, I scanned cars and drivers, mothers, papoosing infants, grandmothers, peasants on the streets, building tops, curtained windows. I searched for skies above for helicopters. There's no question in my mind that the DEA and Mexico government are tracking our movements. From the moment Kate and I gone out on a limb with her tweet in January 2012 through the beginning of our encrypted negotiation to meet El Chapo, I had been bewildered by his willingness to risk our visit. If Kate was being surveilled, or must those names on any share flight manifest, I see no spying eyes, but I assume they are there. Through the windshield, as we approach the hotel, testing. I see a casually dressed man in his 40s appear on the sidewalk, simultaneously directing our driver to the entryway while dialing a number on his cell phone. This is Alonzo, whom I'm about to learn is an associate of El Chapo. We grabbed our bags and exit the minivan. Almost immediately, the traffic around the designated pickup point diminishes. Out of my view, someone is blocking the neighboring streets. Then, a lone convoy of up-armor SUVs appears in front of our hotel. Alonzo asks us to surrender our electronics and leave them behind, cell phones, computers, etc. I had left mine in Los Angeles, anticipating this requirement. My colleagues surrendered theirs to the hotel desk. We are whisked into the vehicles. Alonzo rides shotgun. My colleagues are in the back. Alonzo and the driver, are speaking quick and quiet Spanish. My own Spanish is weak at best. By day, and put on the spot, I'm pretty restricted to hola and adios. By night, with perhaps a few beers, I can get by speaking and listening slowly. Conversation in front seems unthreatening. Just cooperative exchanges of logistics facilitate our journey. Throughout the hour-and-a-half drive from the city across farmlands, both men receive frequent BBM messages, perhaps updated on our route to keep our convoy safe. With each message received, the needle on the speedometer rises. We are cruising at well over 100 miles an hour. I like speed, but not without my own hands on the wheels to call myself or pretend to have any reason to mention the route for our journey. It's that upon which I concentrate, the not to exceed between the two strangers leading our pursuit. We arrive at a dirt airfield. Security men in tailored suits stand beside two 6-seat single-engine prop planes. It isn't until boarding one of the two planes that I realized that our driver had been the 29-year-old son of El Chapo, Alfredo Guzmán. He boards beside me, designated among our personal escorts to see his father. He's handsome, lean, and smartly dressed with a wristwatch that might be of a more value than the money housed by the central banks of most nation states. He's got one hell of a wristwatch. The plane takes off, and we travel a couple of hours. Two bouncing birds, side by side. The thermals over the mountains. I'm out in this jungle. It once again occurs to me that all the risks that are being taken by El Chapo in receiving us, we had not been blindfolded. We had experienced traveler might have been able to collect a series of triangulated landmarks by re-navigating the journey. But through his faith in Kate, whom he'd only ever known through letters or BBM, are we enjoying an unusual trust. I ask Alfredo how he can be sure we are not being followed or surveilled. He smiles. I note he doesn't blink much. At points out, our red scrambler switch below the cockpit controls. That switch blocks ground radar. He says he adds that they have an inside man who provides notification when the military's high altitude surveillance plane has been deployed. He has great confidence that there are no unwanted eyes on us. We, Kate, helping along in translations, we chat throughout the flight. I'm mindful not to say anything that may alienate his father's welcome before we even arrive. It's been about 2 hours of flight when we descend from above the lush peaks to wand a sea level field. The pilot, using his encrypted cell phone, talks to the ground. I sense that the military is beefing up operations in its search area. Our original landing zone has suddenly been deemed insecure. After a quiet and bit of chatter from ground to air and some unnervingly low altitude circling, we find an alternate dirt patch where two SUVs wait in the shade of an adjacent tree line and land. The flight has been just bumpy enough that each of us had taken a few swigs off a bottle of tequila, a brand new brand that Kate is marketing. I step from the plane to earth, ever so sobering my bearings, and move toward the beckoning waves of waiting drivers. I throw my satchel onto the open back of one of the SUVs and lumber over to the tree line to take a piss. Dick in hand, I do consider it among my body parts vulnerable to the knives of irrational narcotypes, and take my fond last look before tucking it back into my pants. Espinoza recently undergone back surgery. He stretched, gusting, readjusted his surgical corset, exposing it. It draws on me that one of my gaiters might mistake the corset for a device that contains a wire, a chip, a tracker. With all their eyes on him, Espinoza methodically adjusts the Velcro toward his belly, slowly looks up, sharing his trademark smile with his suspicious eyes around him. Then, cirugía del espalda, back surgery, he says, situation diffused. We embark into the dense mountain jungle in a 2-truck convoy, crossing through the river after river for several long hours. Espinoza and El Alto with the driver in front, myself and Kate with Alonzo and Alfredo in the rear. At times the jungle opens up to farmland, then close again into forest. As the elevation begins to climb, road signage announces approaching townships. And then, as it seems we are at the entrance of Oz, the highest peak visibly within reach, we arrive at a military checkpoint. 2 uniformed government soldiers, weapons at the ready, approach our vehicle. Alfredo lowers his passenger window. The soldiers back away, looking embarrassed, and wave us through. Wow, so it is. The power of a Guzman face and the corruption of an institution. Did this mean that we were nearing the man? It was still several hours into the jungle before any sign we were getting closer. Then strangers appear as if in from nowhere onto the dirt track, checking in with our drivers and exchanging hand radios. We move on. Small villages materialize from the village jungle. Hana-chan. I'm reading from Rolling Stone. I'm being recorded now. Dígame. Tunnel. I'm going to be late. No, I change right now. This minute I change. Dígame, número de autobús. Ciao, ciao, ciao. Then strangers appear as if from nowhere onto the dirt track, checking with drivers and exchanging hand radios. We move on. Small villages materialize from jungle. Protective peasants, eyes relaxed, at a wave of familiar drivers. Cell phones are no use here. So I imagine there are radio repeaters or topographical high points facilitating their internal communication. Reader's note, Tom Duty, listeners, I hope you're enjoying this. I think it's extraordinary. And more to come. I hope to finish this. I leave a lot of things unfinished on my channel. This might be one of them. It is my intention It is my pledge that this is not an unfinished work from Rolling Stones. This has been Tom Duty, middle-aged American living in New Jersey near the Lincoln Tunnel. If you were to visit my website, you would type Howdy Doody into Google. You'll find the correct spelling of the famous puppet. You then combine Tom Duty and a Google search for my site. Thank you for listening. Have a good day, good evening, a restful night's sleep. Ciao. Listeners, I was trying to get you a view of New York City. The skyline is right there. The only place where I have shade, where I don't have reflection that obscures the image, there's some people smoking. So it would have been like I was filming him, which would have been inappropriate. Thank you for listening. Have a good day, good evening, a restful night's sleep. Ciao.